friend of mine recommended this booklet to me by Timothy Keller, and it was so beautifully concise in presenting a healthy view of yourself and how that leads to joy and freedom, and I just wanted to share with you what I learned from it. Like most of us, I've struggled with issues of self-esteem and shame and pride and have encountered all sorts of views in how to address those issues. It's so easy to overcorrect when you're trying to deal with these things and either use low or high self-esteem to try to fix problems, like either shaming yourself into better behavior or lauding yourself so much that you ignore issues that you have. In this booklet, Timothy Keller uses 1 Corinthians 3:21 through 4:7 to dismantle both of those extreme reactions to issues of how you view yourself. He teaches that a filled up ego as opposed to an overinflated one or a deflated one is a healthy ego, and that it's like a person's toes. You don't notice it, it just works. The keys to this are so simple. First of all, we set aside what other people think of us. You can never measure up to what everyone else thinks you should be, and it's a terrible place to look for your self-worth. We all know, whether or not we can convince ourselves to believe it moment to moment, that you can't make everybody else happy. I think that first part is pretty well accepted, and we've all probably heard a lot about that. But the second step is a little more radical. Keller says we need to let go of what we think of ourselves. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 4, "It is a very small thing that I should be judged by you or by any human court. In fact, I do not even judge myself." Paul has such an interesting view of himself. In 1 Timothy, he talks about being the chief of sinners, which is another way of saying that he thinks he's the worst of all sinners. But he also has this incredible confidence to teach others, and he ended up being one of the most significant leaders in history. He had no problem telling other people to follow his example, and he's just incredibly bold. How do those two things fit together? Keller explains that what Paul is saying is that while you can't look outside of yourself and find what you're worth, you also can't look inside of yourself and find what you're worth. Our tendency is to tell people who are hurt by what other people think of them to look inside themselves and follow their heart, and if they're doing that, then they're good. But even if you are just looking inside of yourself to decide whether or not you're doing the right thing, you're still going to fail to meet those expectations sometimes. You're still going to fail that standard that you've set up for yourself. So the only solution in reconciling, if you're still good in spite of that, is to maybe lower your standards and be like, well, I don't have to be perfect all the time. But then you know that you are sort of person who lowers standards for yourself. So regardless, if you're looking outside to other people's opinion of yourself or inside to your opinion of yourself, you're still going to fall short. But Paul reminds us that there's a perfect outside solution. Every day we put ourselves on trial asking, am I good enough? Am I valuable? Am I worthy? But Paul is able to take himself outside of that courtroom because the verdict has already been passed on him. Paul knows he didn't measure up to any standard. He was a sinner, a hypocrite, a zealous murderer. But then Jesus radically showed up and literally knocked him off his high horse and declared him God's. The only solution to our ego issues is to see ourselves as God sees us, unable to measure up to the standard of goodness, but utterly loved and worth saving. Jesus, who came to earth as fully God, fully man, came to take away the evil in us and redeem us and restore us into being who God created us to be. The moment you believe in God and that Jesus is the only way to Him, God sees you as His beloved child, in whom He is extraordinarily pleased. That verdict, that love, is what leads you to being a good person, not the other way around. So Paul, knowing that God sees him through what Jesus did for him, is able to have a completely healthy view of himself, where he doesn't connect either the good things or the bad things he's done to who he is. Paul knows that he's valuable and loved, and he is able to enjoy his identity despite remembering the evil things that he's done and apart from knowing the profound impact that he has on the world. He's also free to enjoy everyone else because it has no threat to his identity. And keying in on that enjoyment, that's one of the biggest takeaways I have from this booklet. Pride sucks the happiness from everything. C.S. Lewis says that the only pleasure pride has is in having more of something than someone else. Doing anything out of pride or shame is completely devoid of joy because you're only doing it for someone else's view of yourself or for your view of yourself. There's no happiness to be found there. When I think of the impact this should have on me, it's, staggering. It's like Keller says, a healthy ego draws no attention to itself. It's just like any other part of your healthy, functioning body. You don't think about it. If I am able to embrace this more actively in my life, I should be able to do things without fear of failure. I should be able to accept criticism and compliments without it affecting my core view of myself. I'd be able to stop comparing myself to others altogether. And I wouldn't consider it a failure to take care of my body and my brain when they decide they're done, because that has nothing to do with my worth. And it would be just as delightful to succeed or to be mediocre or to fail, and it'd be just as delightful to see other people succeeding more than me, because it just has nothing to do with me at all. And that's what Keller says is gospel humility, seeing yourself in that light and being able to enjoy yourself and love yourself just the same way you enjoy and love everything else, or the sunset, or your toes. It just makes no difference because you know who you are and what you're worth, and that God loves you. Full stop. So Keller says this is the path to true Christian joy, and I wanted to share that with you. If you have any more questions about what it means to be a Christian and why this view of yourself only works in a Christian framework, I would be really, really happy to point you in the right direction. Much love to you, and I'll see you again.